In the previous video, Dr. Tomlinson began her discussion of differentiation by describing it as responsive teaching that includes respectful tasks, quality curriculum, flexible grouping, continual assessment, and community building. In this video, Dr. Tomlinson will expand on her definition of differentiation with an examination of how successful teaching, including differentiated instruction, begins by connecting with students and establishing a supportive relationship with them. And now, Dr. Tomlinson.
If you're having trouble hearing her, her comment was that she has a pretty good sized group of students, which is going to get bigger next year, and she's already spending more life than she's got planning for the classroom. And she's aware of the range of needs, it's very clear. But you just kind of look at yourself and you wonder, how do I do anything else? You know, what do I do to target each kid and make it work? And I'll give you two brief answers to that are the only ones that I really know about. One is, differentiation is not asking for the same thing that individualization used to. When I started teaching, by the way, these problems never change in education. They don't go away. It's a little more intense now because diversity is getting so much greater academically in our classes. But the problems the issue, the challenge has always been there. And our understanding as teachers is just like it is in medicine or engineering or architecture or athletics, continues to grow. And we keep trying to reach out a little better to solve the problems. When I was a young teacher, we were supposed to individualize instruction, and what that really meant was a separate lesson plan for 150 different students. There are two problems with that. I'm not good enough as a teacher to know what's a 30th harder than the kid next to you, or to distinguish between every nuance of everything. And if I were to try to do that anyhow, really all I could do it on would be just finite skills. Can he do this skill, and then you add on the next little skill and add on the next little skill. We've come to realize that understandings are really key to pushing kids forward. And so rather than focusing on just finite skills, trying to make sure kids really understand how to do stuff. And what that leads us to is that in most classrooms, most of the time, if there were 2 or 3 ways to do something, or one way plus a sidebar where you could extend something for kids or support some kids with something, it works better. In other words, instead of seeing teaching as 30 points that you're trying to aim at, try looking at it as 2 ballparks. And if you could just get kids in the right ballpark, they'd be able to function okay. And so it's not quite as awful as trying to think of, I have to do something absolutely different for every kid. You can kind of look at it as who seems to be moving along okay and who's really stuck in the mud. And just dealing with those 2 eventualities can make a really big difference. Or who needs a lot more help from me and who needs a little more help from me. You can look at zones, kind of looking at Vygotsky's zone of proximal development rather than finite points, and that helps your thinking a little bit. The second thing, though, I think is true is that everything we ever do as human beings that matters is evolutionary. I don't know that I've ever known a parent who brought a kid home from the hospital the first day and said, I've got it now. I understand everything I'm supposed to do for the next 20 years. Kids 20 or 22 coming home from college and the parent's still stewing. He's staying out too late at night, and now he doesn't think I have a right to tell him to come in. They've been trying to work this out for 22 years and they still haven't got the dance exactly right yet. I think being patient with yourself and saying, what's one step I can take this week that I haven't tried before? Not how do I do everything, but what's one refinement I can add? You're going to see folks talk about some low prep strategies and some high prep strategies for differentiation. The low prep strategies don't take you a great deal of time to plan. They're not terribly invasive of your classroom management routines. You can use them over and over and over again, and you get comfortable with them, and so do kids. And with those low prep strategies, you can make a lot of progress. And then just every once in a while, add kind of a higher prep piece to it. What they tell us is that when they study educators, we tend to fall in sort of 3 clumps. they're sprinters, and they're slow runners, and they're people who stand. People who stand don't ever change any, are pretty much where they were when they finish as when they started. Life just doesn't change. You more or less replicate the same thing over and over again with nuanced changes. So who's left that's interesting to look at is the sprinters and the paced runners. And what they tell us is the folks who are the paced runners, the folks who run the race of teaching like they're long distance runners, do better than the sprinters. Sprinters will go out and try every new thing, quickly, got to do it all, got to implement everything, but they get too tired before it's over. Too many things happening and it wears you down. The person who moves at a slow pace, reasoned pace, but moving, is the one who's most likely to get there. And I think that's helpful to think about as teachers too, because when you are working 12 hours a day, if what you perceive is somebody's telling you to work 12 more, that can't be done. And so trying to look at things that allow you to move, but to do it at a pace that doesn't sink you, I think is the secret to growth. You don't learn how to play golf the first weekend you go out on the golf course. You don't learn to become a good swimmer, a competitive swimmer, the first time you jump in the pool. You don't learn to become a great chef the first time you pick up a pot. You just keep working at it over time if it's useful to you. And that's what I think the best course probably is. Other thoughts or questions, not that that solves all the world's problems, but I do want to say to you that at least somebody that you see standing in the front of the room isn't telling you to go home and commit hara-kiri to change your classroom. What I'm talking about is developing a vision for yourself and moving slowly and persistently in that direction. Yes?
In response to that question too, I think working with other people, working with partners, another colleague who's along the journey with you, or if you have specialist staff in your district, the reading specialist, special ed teacher, gifted person, whatever, can be very, very helpful. So you're not a lone ranger.
Yeah. That's so important, just hugely important. I can't even imagine how many times one fifth grade teacher is preparing a math lesson on something in geometry, and the teacher down the hall is preparing exactly the same one, and they have no idea they're doing the same thing. If you got together and said, okay, we're all doing this unit on geology in April, let's talk about what the kids should know, understand, and be able to do at the end, and what we typically do with that, and where we might have student needs, planning for unpredictability. Then how about if you differentiate this part, and I differentiate this part, and then we'll bring it back together and share it. That accomplishes two things. That partnership keeps you going and you're accountable for something, so it keeps you moving. But my goodness, you get two good things for the price of one, and then you've got that in a repertoire that you can hang on to. That happens in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools across the country. We replicate things, spend a ton of time all doing the same stuff, and if we did it together, it would be so much better. And we really need to get much better at having ELL specialists and special ed folks and gifted ed and reading working in classrooms to help teachers know how to do some of this stuff, rather than assuming we can fix everything by sending it down the hall, and those things never really intersect. And we do have specialists who know a ton of stuff we don't know. They have strategies, they have insights, and if we could pool that, that would be a lot less lonely. And of course, on behalf of teachers, for those of you who are administrators, it makes a huge difference to buy time for teachers to work together, to find time where there is space in the day, space in the week. Just finished reading the proofs on a book where a high school principal just flat quit all her faculty meetings from the standpoint of informational faculty meetings. Once she went into that school, they never had another one. They had faculty meetings twice a month, but they never discussed business in them. They discussed differentiation every time they had one. And that doesn't seem like very much for the first faculty meeting or the second faculty meeting or the third faculty meeting, but over the space of several years, those teachers ended up with dozens and dozens and dozens of hours to work together to solve problems that needed solving, rather than having to find all the time on their own to be able to do that. Having summer institutes in your own district where teachers have the opportunity and some support to get together to pre-plan things. Those kinds of things can make it a lot more feasible as well. Okay, what I want to do now is to look with you at some of what I would consider to be non-negotiables of differentiation. Again, these are elements that I think we have to be working on as teachers all the time in order to make our classroom function like it should. Not because a textbook says so, but because if any one of those elements gets limp on you, it tends to sort of limp up the other elements as well in one way or another. And so these are things that I think we need to have big conversations about. And an interesting thing for you as you go through the day would be to listen to somebody who's talking to you about a particular strategy. If we didn't believe that strategy was worthwhile, we wouldn't have put it in the conference. But it's still interesting to ask yourself, what if I had the strategy down pat, but was missing these other things? What would happen? Where would my gaps be? One of the ones that I want to talk with you about, and I'm going to do it at a little more length than some of the others actually, is one that I don't think we talk about very much in school. Something in my gut has always told me this was important. And that was true as a teacher. But what I'm finding now as I have the opportunity to visit other classrooms and to do research and to read research is that it's actually more important than I actually ever knew it was. It was not just instinctively important, it's sort of empirically important. And that is the necessity to connect with kids. You're probably not going to have any other sessions during the week that are called Connecting with Kids 101. But there are a ton of kids that are in our school where if we don't connect with them, I don't care what else we've done and how well we've done it, the chances are pretty good that we're going to miss them. We're just flat going to miss them. Here's what I think happens in schools. Kids come to us with a variety of needs. And you and I have a choice, and sometimes we make the choice consciously and sometimes we make it unconsciously. I have taught for a time where I guess I knew the kids had needs, I just somehow wasn't seeing it as my job to do anything about that. I was a better teacher when I said, let me see what these needs are and kind of let me turn in response to those needs. In other words, let me be a person who comes in wanting to respond to the fact that this is a kid who does not yet read proficiently and therefore can't read my textbook very well, even though it's the only textbook I've got. I can either overlook that or I can say, boy, that must be pretty uncomfortable. Let me see what I can do about that. So kids bring us needs. We either respond to those needs and begin our world turning that way, or we don't respond to them. And then we have curriculum and instruction. And I like this graphic. I didn't draw it, but I actually selected this one because the curriculum and instruction piece is huge. That's our job. But in truth, if we're not responding to the kids' needs, the curriculum and instruction is often going to turn without engaging the kid. And so it's turning, but the kid's kind of over here on the side and it's not engaging with us. We really sort of need to be connecting with the kids and addressing those needs to drive the whole mechanism that's in our classrooms. The literature, this says, is full of examples of teachers enabling students, even the most unlikely ones, to learn to outstanding degrees and reach beyond prediction to a self-confident, socially committed state of growth. Successful teaching begins by establishing a supportive relationship with a student. I know you can see if you think I'm right or wrong on this, but I can't remember ever having heard a story from a friend or a student or in a book where somebody said, you know, that teacher turned me around as a learner. I didn't think I could do math. I didn't see any point in science. I didn't get what they were trying to teach. And that teacher totally turned me around. And by the way, I don't even think he knew what my name was. I don't think he ever paid any attention to me. He was just such a darn brilliant lecturer, it did the thing. Do you get that story real often? What I get is that person reached out to me as an individual and kind of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and established a relationship with me and wouldn't let me go. And somehow in that process of being known, the subject became the proxy for all the things that were good that were happening to me there. And I learned to love science because that teacher cared about me. I really sort of think that's the pattern that things go in. My parents would have been happy to tell you that I had the most useless major in the universe in college. I majored in German, which even a long time ago was not the most marketable skill in town. I had taken French in elementary school, and I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was just sort of what you did. And then I took Latin in middle school and passionately deplored it, and took German only because the Latin teacher said, if you're not going to continue with Latin 3, which would be a foolish decision, you should certainly take French or Spanish because they're the most like Latin and your Latin will help you. What you definitely don't want to do is take German because there's no connection. And I thought, that's it, where's the sign-up line? Right there, I'll go sign up for German. And so I did, not with any sense that it was something I was going to really care about. But the German teacher saw me as a human being. She saw me as an individual. She saw me as somebody who might have possibilities when I couldn't see that in myself. And that feeling sucked me into German just like a vacuum cleaner. You know, I was right there. And anything that had to do with German was wonderful because I was recognized as a living, breathing entity in that class, and I didn't feel it anywhere else. Her connection with me was the conduit to German. Any of you ever had that happen yourself or in your children's lives? How many of you know what I'm talking about there, either because you've experienced it or kids that you know have? You think I'm right or wrong that kids don't get turned around as learners just because we tell them such brilliant things in class without knowing them? What do you think? Does the connecting matter, really? I really think it's huge. As a result of an intensive case study of a 9th grade teacher and her students who were all strugglers in school, this researcher identified 3 kinds of care that contributed to this sense of being connected with, this sense of being known. And I think this is interesting because I think most of us want to connect with kids. You just sort of think, well, how do I do that? You know, I've got 150 kids walking around, or I've got 30 kids glued to me for 8 hours a day. What do I do to connect? I don't mind connecting, but where does it come from? And what this researcher discovered was that there was time in the schedule of these teachers who turned around non-successful kids for discovery talk. Time to get to know them. When? I don't know, maybe you sit with them at lunch even if you don't want to. Maybe you let them sneak up the back stairs to your room in the morning so that they can come in and talk with you. Maybe you save the first 5 minutes of class to do some sort of chit-chat with the kids and then you move on briskly. You probably make up the 5 minutes if you have lured them in with that sort of sense of caring about them, and you probably can more than make up that time. Help teachers who were available. And this is part of differentiation. I'm not going to let you sit there and flounder with this thing and just keep floundering. When you see that you're having a problem, I'll find a way to get to you. I'm making space in class to get to you when you need it. I'm available at these times in the class. I can do many lessons. I meet with small groups. You've got cups on your table that you can stack, and when there's a red cup up, which means stop, I'm going to come get you quickly. But also personal help. A thing that I used to do with my students, which sometimes when I talk with teachers about seems controversial now, and I know life gets increasingly complicated by the day, but my students had personal journals that they were asked to write in maybe once or twice a semester just so they remembered they were there and knew where to put them. But other than that, they could write in the journals to me about anything, anytime that they wanted to tell me about. And they were 12, and so I got a lot of inside scoop on music that I wasn't particularly going to buy from the store, and lots of information about football games I didn't really plan to watch for the weekend, and a bunch of stuff about arguments with their buddies. Mostly I didn't get too many journals on any day, but when I got one, I answered it and gave it right back to the kids. And occasionally I got something that was a really bad thing, something really hard happening in that kid's life, and it was safe to put it in that journal and put it in the little box on my desk, and I always responded to those. Most kids didn't have a crisis to tell me about during the year, but I honestly think those journals mattered because what they said is, if I did, this would be a way to handle it. and she would answer me. And so even for the kids who didn't need it in the crisis mode, it was this sort of sense of, she's got a little bit of time for me to talk about the things that I just want to talk about, and P.S., that might not be prepositions and conjunctions today. And friendly listening, trying to really understand why can't the kids sit still these days to listen in class? What is it that happens in this group over here that gets him really excited and able to engage with the subject where it doesn't seem to happen under these other circumstances? And the conclusion that this researcher drew was that caring relationships were the key to re-engaging disengaged students. Caring relationships were the key to turning around disengagement with school, more so than any instructional practice or classroom procedure. If you differentiate instruction and you do it because somebody told you to do it, and you're not doing it in response to the kids in front of you, you're simply doing it because the district says you have to, not going to work all that well. It works well when it's a mechanism for reaching out to kids, and when the kids understand that. If it's the teacher, dog, and pony show, it's not nearly as powerful. So we're going to do a lot with you about instructional practices, classroom procedure, quality of curriculum, but I swear to you, you can have every one of those things in place. And if the kids feel like you're disengaged from them, I think you lose a lot. Agree, sort of agree, disagree? What do you think? Students who have not succeeded in school are likely to be functioning with a skills deficit that predicts future failure. In other words, they have low skill. They also don't want to fail again because that's not particularly pleasant. And so those students often don't even want to engage with us academically. The truth of the matter is it's better for your self-concept if you don't try and fail than if you keep trying and fail over and over again. If you're not trying, at least you've got a reason why you failed as opposed to feeling stupid about it. So in addition to low skill, they have low will. When a teacher establishes a personal relationship with this kid, the kid finds a reason to take that academic risk again, to try one more time. And I don't think the words on the textbook page typically do that for a kid. In other words, that provides the will to go again. And once the student engages and takes the chance here because he or she believes the teacher is with them, what that means is they now stand a chance of acquiring the skill again. And I think that's how that really works. Success in learning, combined with the continued investment from the teacher then, allows kids to develop skill and will that are reinforcing to one another. But I think much of the time, it's that teacher connection that starts the spark going again.
This work? Wow, I don't think I've ever
As Dr.
heard that.
Tomlinson pointed out,
Can you show me
once teachers successfully engage students and are attentive to their needs, then learning can take place and students can begin to acquire knowledge and skills. In the next video, Dr. Tomlinson will look closer at differentiation and instruction as she demonstrates how teachers' connections with students can work as a bridge to a quality curriculum.